Arizona Territory, 1879. The sun was dropping low behind the red cliffs when the woman stepped into the road and raised her revolver. Dust hung in the air, glowing orange in the dying light. The wagon creaked to a stop, and the horse stamped once, uneasy. The man holding the reins blinked against the sun and slowly lifted both hands. He did not shout or curse. He only studied her, calm in a way that made her grip the gun tighter. She told him to step down from the wagon. Her voice was low and steady, but it scraped her throat on the way out. She warned him she did not want to shoot him, but she would if she had to. He nodded and climbed down from the bench with care, boots crunching against dry gravel. He kept his hands raised, palms open like he had nothing to hide. He said that if she planned to rob him, she should at least know his name. She snapped back that she did not care what his name was. She wanted the wagon and whatever was inside it. He smiled faintly and said she would care. Then he told her his name was Elias Thorne. Something about the way he said it unsettled her. She cocked the hammer and told him to back away. He did, slow and careful, never breaking eye contact. The horse pawed the dirt and snorted. He asked if she was alone. She told him it was none of his business. His eyes moved over her then, not the gun, but her face. The dirt on her skirt, the frayed shawl around her shoulders, the way she stood like someone who had already lost everything worth losing. He said she did not look like a thief. She told him he talked too much for a man staring down a gun barrel. He said whatever she thought he had, there was not much of it. She climbed onto the wagon seat and grabbed the reins. She said she would take her chances. Then she noticed the crate behind the bench. She pried it open and found flour, dried apples, and a small sack of coins. Her hands shook as she gathered it all. That was when he told her she forgot one thing. She spun toward him, gun still trained on his chest, and demanded to know what. He brushed dust from his coat and said his last name. The words made no sense to her. He explained that if she was going to steal his wagon, she might as well take his last name too. Her anger flared, sharp and desperate. She asked what that was supposed to mean. He stepped closer, voice gentle. He said she did not want to rob him. She wanted help, and he was offering it. Her knees buckled before she could stop them. The gun slipped from her fingers. She fell from the bench, hitting the ground hard. Elias was there in an instant, catching her before her face struck the dirt. She tried to push him away, but her arms had no strength left. She muttered that she had not eaten in 2 days. He said he figured as much. She told him to leave her alone. He said he would not. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and asked her name. After a long moment, she told him it was Julieta James. He repeated it like it mattered. Then he lifted her onto the wagon bench, handed her water, and turned the horse east toward his camp. She woke to the smell of beans and bacon. A fire crackled nearby. Elias sat across from it, stirring a tin pot. The wagon stood untouched, and the horse grazed quietly behind it. He told her she was safe. She asked why he had not taken her to the sheriff. He said she did not belong in a jail. She belonged somewhere safe. She scoffed and told him he did not know anything about her. He said he knew enough. She was hungry, she was desperate, and she was not a killer. Silence stretched until she whispered that she had 2 children, a girl and a boy, 7 and 5. Their names were Della and Drew. She told him they were back in Prescott, or they had been. She had left them with a woman she trusted. When she returned, the children were gone, sold off as labor. Elias crossed the space between them and placed a plate of food in her hands. He said they were going to get her children back. She asked how. He said he had a wagon, horses, and connections across the territory. She could help him move goods. He would help her find her children. She asked why he would do that. He said he believed in second chances, and because she had tried to rob him instead of begging. That took grit. She told him he was either the kindest man she had ever met or the dumbest. He smiled and said maybe both. They rode together the next morning under a pale blue sky. Julieta sat beside him, holding a map he had drawn from memory, each town marked with care. Days passed in quiet rhythm. They camped near creeks and cottonwoods. Elias never pushed her for answers. He gave her space and steadiness. One night, she caught him watching her by the fire. He only said he was glad she was there. She lay awake, listening to his breathing across the flames. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone. If this story is touching your heart already, let me know in the comments where you are watching from and if you have ever gone through something similar. Also, tell me what you would like me to improve in future stories. By the 6th day, they reached a small town. A boy at the trading post said 2 children matching her description had been sold to a rancher outside town weeks earlier. Julieta gripped the edge of the wagon, hands shaking. Elias told her there was only one way to find out. They rode hard toward the ranch as the sun climbed higher. She prayed under her breath the whole way. The ranch sat low in a shallow valley, surrounded by dust and scrub. A few crooked fences leaned against the land like they had given up long ago. Julieta's chest felt tight as the wagon rolled closer. Every mile had filled her with hope, and every mile had threatened to break her heart all over again. A tall man stepped out from the main building, wiping his hands on his trousers. Elias climbed down first, his posture calm but firm. Julieta followed, her legs unsteady as her boots hit the ground. She told the rancher they were looking for 2 children, brown hair, a girl named Dilla and a boy named Drew. The man frowned and said he had bought a pair like that. Quiet children, good workers. Julieta felt the world tilt. Elias stepped slightly in front of her without thinking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He said they would pay double what the man had given for the children. The rancher squinted at him and asked if the children were theirs. Elias answered that they were hers and that they were taking them back. The man's eyes moved from Elias to Julieta. He noticed how Elias stood between them, steady and unafraid. He noticed how Julieta's fingers clutched Elias's sleeve, white-knuckled and shaking. After a long moment, the rancher spat into the dirt and waved a hand toward the shed. He muttered that he had not wanted them anyway. Julieta ran before he finished speaking. The shed door creaked open. Inside, crouched on a pile of hay, were her children, smaller than she remembered, thinner. Their eyes were wide with fear. She said Della's name like a prayer. The girl stood slowly, unsure, then said Mama. Julieta fell to her knees and pulled both children into her arms. She cried into their hair, holding them like she might never let go. Their small arms wrapped around her, tight and trembling. Elias stayed back, giving them space. When Julieta finally looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. She met his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." That night the children slept curled together in the wagon bed. Julieta sat by the fire, staring into the flames, her body exhausted and her heart overflowing. Elias sat beside her, close enough to feel, but not crowding her. She told him he had meant what he said. He told her he did not say things he did not mean. She said he had been kind, kinder than she deserved. He told her she deserved more than she had ever been given, and if she let him, he wanted to give her more. Her breath caught. He reminded her that she had forgotten something. She asked what. He said that when she robbed his wagon, she forgot one thing. She already knew the answer before he said it. His last name. He told her he wanted her, and he wanted those children too. She told him if he would have her, she would stay. He rose before first light the next morning. The air was cold and quiet. He fed the coals and set a pot to boil, careful not to wake anyone. The children slept bundled together. Julieta lay still, her face peaceful in sleep. He left a clean shirt beside her shawl and went back to the fire. When she woke, she watched him pour coffee without speaking. Her hair had fallen loose from its braid. She looked softer now, unguarded. She said she had not expected to sleep so deeply. He told her she needed it. She talked about how Dila spoke in her sleep and how Drew ground his teeth. Elias said he had noticed. She asked if he had ever had children. He said no. He had wanted them once. Life had turned sideways. She asked if he had lost someone. He told her about a woman named Anna. Fever had taken her before winter. Julieta looked down, understanding without words. She told him she did not know where to go now. Prescott had burned her. She could not risk certain lands with the children. Elias told her about an old homestead near Sunita. The roof needed fixing, but the well was clean. He said it was hers if she wanted it. She asked if he trusted her that much. He said he did, because she had done everything hard without help, and because he wanted to build something that lasted with her. They broke camp slowly. The children helped where they could. Julieta watched them with quiet pride. She asked Elias if he had meant what he said about the homestead. He said he would not have offered if he did not mean it. She said she wanted it, but not just the land. She wanted his name too. He took her hand, rough and warm, and held it without words. When Elias climbed onto the wagon seat, he waited. Julieta came back with both children and settled beside him. Della leaned against his coat. Drew rested on Julieta's lap. He asked if she was ready. She looked out at the road ahead and said she was. The road to Sunita wound through low grassland and broken fences. They stopped near a dry creek bed that evening. Julieta made biscuits while Elias built the fire. The children watched with bright eyes. She asked him questions about the land. He told her what grew best and what failed. He spoke like a man who had tried and tried again. She asked what needed fixing at the homestead. He told her about the walls, the barn, the well. She asked if he really thought they could manage it. He said yes, because she was already doing harder things. Dilla came to sit beside him without a word. Elias looked at Julieta and said he wanted her say in how the home was built. She said she wanted a door that closed right, no gaps, and a latch the children could work from the inside. He promised they would make one. As the sun dipped low, they ate together. The children laughed. The fire crackled. For the first time, Julieta allowed herself to imagine something steady. The land changed as they traveled south. The red stone gave way to wide grassland, broken by mesquite and the bones of old fences half buried in sand. The wagon moved slower now, careful over uneven ground. The horse knew the pace, steady and patient. Julieta kept the children shaded under a canvas flap she tied up with twine. Drew played quietly with a pine cone he had found, pulling it apart piece by piece. Della stayed close to her mother, watching the road with serious eyes. Elias guided the reins with one hand, his other resting easy at his side. He pointed out a dry creek bed ahead and said they would stop there for supper. Julieta nodded and said she would like to make biscuits if there was still lard left. He handed her the tin from beneath the seat and said it was a worthy cause. Della brightened and said her mother made the kind with soft middles. They camped beneath a twisted ironwood tree whose roots gripped the bank of the wash. Elias gathered branches and built the fire low. Julieta knelt beside the Dutch oven, rolling dough with an empty bottle. The children chewed jerky and watched every move. As the biscuits baked, Julieta asked if Elias had ever been this far south before. He said not often, but enough to know the land. She said she had heard people claim nothing grew here. He told her it depended on what you planted and how you cared for it. She said he sounded like a man who had failed before. He said he was, and a man who had tried again. The biscuits came out golden and steaming. Drew clapped his hands. They ate as the sun dipped low, shadows stretching long across the wash. For a while, no one spoke. Elias finally said that once the roof was fixed, they could dig a small garden close to the house. He said it would keep animals from getting bold. Julieta said they would need fencing. She knew a smith in Patagonia who owed Elias a favor. Dila asked if they could have a chicken. Julieta smiled and said maybe two, but only if she helped feed them. Dila promised she would. When night settled in, Drew fell asleep curled against his sister. Julieta stayed near the fire, legs tucked beneath her. Elias sat across from her, rubbing a blister on his palm. She brought him a scrap of cloth and a small jar of salve. She wrapped his hand without speaking. He watched her face, the careful way she worked. He asked if she ever thought about what came after all this. She said she tried not to get ahead of herself. He said he did. He thought about her on a porch at sunrise, about children chasing chickens, about tired hands and dust-filled boots. the kind of tired that meant something. She met his gaze across the fire and said, "Then they had better make it last." The embers glowed soft and red between them. She reached across and rested her hand over his. He turned his palm upward and laced his fingers through hers. Neither of them spoke. The first sight of the homestead came with a hard wind. Dust swept sideways, carrying the smell of dry sage. The roof leaned and the door hung loose on one hinge. Still, Julieta stared like she was looking at something holy. Elias stepped down first and offered his hand. The porch creaked but held. Inside was dim and hot, thick with the scent of old wood. A rusted stove sat in the corner. A narrow cot leaned against the wall. Julieta opened the shutter and let light spill across the floor. Della touched a cracked mug on a shelf. Drew crouched to watch ants trail along the wall. Elias said he would sleep on the wagon until they cleared space. Julieta said they would need a second cot the children could share. She would build it. Outside she stood and took in the land. Gold grass, mesquite, distant hills, a hawk circling high. She asked about the well. Elias pumped it until water spilled out cool and clear. He said it would hold. She knelt and let the water run over her fingers. She said the land spoke if you listened close. That night, they laid quilts for the children near the hearth. Elias hung a blanket for privacy and spread his bedroll outside. Julieta lay awake listening to the wind through the eaves. She rose before dawn. Elias was already awake, sawing boards. She asked if he always worked before sunup. He said it helped him think. She asked what he was thinking about now. He said the cot would need more boards if it was going to last through winter. She said she did not plan much anymore, not since things fell apart. He said then they would build something that would not. They worked through the morning. Della gathered nails. Drew handed rope. By midday, the cot stood solid. The children tested it with laughter. Julieta watched them from the doorway. Elias came to stand beside her, close, but not touching. She said she had never thought she would have anything steady again. He said he pictured it all the time, her here, the years making the place better instead of harder. She asked if he really meant to stay. He said he meant it the moment he gave her his name. She took his hand and said she would stay too. That night they sat outside under sharp stars. He passed her a cup of warm brew. He asked what she had dreamed of before all this. She said a kitchen with a window, a place where no one knocked to take anything. He said they would put in a window. He said his dream was someone who stayed when the wind came hard. She leaned her shoulder against his, and together they watched the night settle around them. The days settled into a rhythm shaped by work and quiet hope. Morning came early on the homestead. The light crept in slow through the east wall, warming the dust and wood. Julieta woke to the sound of Elias already moving outside, steady and unhurried. She stepped out barefoot, the ground cool beneath her feet. Elias was bracing one of the leaning walls, measuring twice before driving a nail. He looked up and smiled like he had been waiting for her to appear. The children woke soon after. Della helped sweep the floor with a bundle of twigs tied together. Drew carried water from the pump, sloshing most of it onto his boots and laughing anyway. Julieta watched them with a full heart. They were thinner than they should be, but they were safe. And they were home. They worked through the mornings. Elias fixed what time and wind had bent. Julieta sorted the space inside, wiping shelves, setting stones around the stove to keep it steady. She cooked simple meals that tasted like comfort. Beans, cornbread, whatever they could spare. In the afternoons, Elias showed Julieta how to brace a wall and set a post. She learned fast. Her hands grew rough, but she did not mind. Each splinter felt like proof they were building something real. One evening, a neighbor rode up, a widow named Ruth who lived a mile down the wash. She brought eggs wrapped in cloth and a quiet kindness that put the children at ease. Della stayed close to her side. Drew asked questions without stopping. Ruth looked at the cabin and nodded once. She said it would stand. Then she looked at Julieta and said the land had been waiting. After that, Ruth came often. Sometimes with news, sometimes with nothing but company. She helped Julieta set a small garden plot near the house. Elias strung wire fencing traded for tools he hauled through Patagonia. The first seeds went into the earth under a bright sun. Beans, corn. Hope pressed into the soil with bare hands. At night, Julieta lay awake listening to the children breathe. The wind moved around the cabin, but it no longer sounded like a threat. Elias slept outside beneath the lean-to, keeping watch without being asked. One morning, Julieta found an old horseshoe hanging above the door. Elias said he found it beneath the floorboards. She touched it later when no one was watching and whispered a thank you to whatever luck still listened. The door came next. Elias built it solid, no gaps. A latch the children could reach from the inside. When it closed for the first time and stayed closed, Julieta pressed her palm to the wood and felt something settle deep in her chest. The rains came late that year. When they finally arrived, they came gentle and steady. Water slid from the eaves into shallow puddles around the porch stones. Julieta stood in the doorway barefoot, skirts damp at the hem, watching the earth drink. Inside, the children practiced numbers on a slate Elias had traded for. Drew sneezed from the dust. Dila hushed him with serious authority. Julieta smiled and turned the cornbread in the oven. Elias came in from the barn, shirt dark with sweat. He said the roof was holding, not a single drop inside. That evening, Julieta handed him a folded paper she had been holding on to for days. The judge had signed it. The adoption was legal, every line. Elias stared at it like it might vanish. Then he folded it careful and said the children were his too. Julieta nodded, tears thick in her throat. She said they had been from the start. This just made it known. The next morning, they rode out to the edge of the property together. Elias had set posts beyond the garden. The children stayed with Ruth, safe and happy. Julieta took the reins of the mule hitched to the small plow. Elias asked if she felt ready. She narrowed her eyes and told him not to doubt her. She walked the mule forward, guiding it straight. Elias followed beside her, adjusting the blade depth. They worked until the sun climbed high and sweat darkened their backs. By the end of the day, the rows were clean and even. At supper, they ate outside to catch the breeze. Della wore a necklace made of split mesquite pods. Drew played with a small whistle Elias carved from cedar. Julieta rested her head against Elias's shoulder as the night sounds rose around them. She said she never thought she would want to stay in one place. He told her she did not have to go anywhere now. She said it was not just the land, it was what they were making of it. He kissed her temples slow and sure. Later, when the lantern burned low, Julieta stood by the window and looked out into the dark. Elias came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. They talked about tomatoes, about cucumbers, about building a smokehouse before fall. He said this life felt earned. She said it was, every mile, every splinter, every long night. He kissed her then, not rushed, not uncertain, the kind of kiss that held a promise inside it. She did not pull away. The seasons shifted without asking permission. Spring eased into summer, and the land answered the care they gave it. The beans pushed through first, green and stubborn. The corn followed, thin at the start, then stronger with each week. Julieta learned the rhythm of the days. She rose with the light, kneaded dough while the stove warmed, and woke the children with gentle touches instead of fear. Dila took her lessons seriously now, numbers and letters scratched carefully onto slate. Drew preferred working beside Elias, dragging boards, asking questions, learning the weight of tools in his small hands. Elias repaired the barn loft one beam at a time. He worked slow but sure, never cutting corners. Julieta watched him from the doorway more than once, struck by the patience in his movements. He fixed what was broken the way her mother had once described, with care, with pride. She began trading preserves once the fruit came in. Jars lined the shelf near the window, glowing amber in the afternoon light. Neighbors stopped by, some curious, some grateful. Word spread quiet, but steady. The homestead became a place people trusted. One evening, Ruth brought news with her basket of eggs. A preacher from Patagonia was passing through in a few weeks. Julieta listened without speaking, but Elias noticed the way her hands stilled. That night, after the children slept, Elias asked her what she was thinking. She said she had never planned on a wedding. Life had taught her not to expect such things. He said neither had he, but some things grew whether you planned for them or not. She looked at him across the low lantern light and said she was afraid to name something and lose it. He told her she had already earned it, by staying, by choosing every day. The night air wrapped around them, warm and still. She reached for his hand, and he held it like it belonged there. The preacher arrived on a clear morning, boots dusty, collar crooked. He smiled easy and spoke like a man who understood long roads and longer silences. They stood beneath the cottonwood near the spring. The children held baskets of wildflowers Ruth had helped gather. Dila took her task seriously. Drew forgot to throw half his petals and clutched them until the end. Julieta wore a faded blue dress with the hem let down. Elias wore a clean shirt with buttons she had stitched herself. When the preacher asked if they would take each other, Julieta answered before the question finished. Elias did not hesitate either. The wind stirred the leaves above them. The land listened. After, Ruth's nephew played a fiddle. The tune was rough but joyful. The children chased fireflies through the grass. Someone laughed. Someone cried. Julieta did both. They built a swing from rope and hung it from the cottonwood. Dila pushed Drew until his laughter echoed across the field. Elias and Julieta sat on the porch steps, fingers laced, watching the home behind them glow warm in the dusk. That night, when the lanterns dimmed and the world went quiet, they lay beside each other, no fear, no need to run. Just the steady rise and fall of breath and the comfort of knowing where they belonged. Summer deepened, the hens laid regular, the garden held. Elias added braces to the barn and cleared the spring pipe. Julieta expanded her trade, swapping preserves for cloth, nails, chalk. The children grew taller. Drew lost a tooth and insisted Elias keep it safe. Della learned to read simple words and practiced them aloud by the fire each night. One evening, Julieta stood at the window and watched the sky turn purple. Elias came up behind her, arms settling around her waist like they had always been meant to. He asked if she was happy. She said she was, not because life was easy, but because it was honest. He kissed her hair and said they would plant tomatoes next year, and cucumbers, and maybe squash. She smiled and added a smokehouse to the list. They talked about winters, about repairs, about nothing at all. The home held. There were hard days still, storms that tested the roof, sickness that lingered too long, worries that crept in late at night. But they faced them together, steady and unafraid. One night, Julieta said she had once believed kindness always came with a cost. Elias told her sometimes it came with a name instead. She rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, strong and sure. Outside, the wind moved gentle through the grass. Inside, everything held. The years did not rush by, but they did not stand still either. Time moved the way the land did, slow and steady, shaped by weather and work. The homestead settled into itself, boards weathered smooth by wind and sun, paths worn clear by familiar footsteps. Julieta woke each morning to the same quiet promise. Light through the window Elias had cut with his own hands, the soft sounds of the children stirring, the smell of coffee warming on the stove. She no longer woke with fear in her chest. She woke with purpose. Dilla grew into her seriousness. She learned to read well and read aloud every evening, her voice steady and proud. Drew followed Elias everywhere, asking endless questions and trying to carry more than his small arms could manage. Elias never told him to stop. He showed him how to balance the weight instead. The land gave back what they gave it. The garden expanded. The smokehouse went up before the first cold nights. The barn stood straight and strong. Neighbors came and went, but the home stayed rooted. Julieta's preserves became known across the nearby towns. People trusted her hands, trusted her word. She traded fair and never took more than she needed. At night, when the work was done, she sat beside Elias on the porch and watched the sky change colors. One evening, a hard storm rolled through. Wind pressed against the walls and rain struck the roof with force. Julieta stood inside, heart tight, listening. Elias only checked the beams once, then came back and sat beside her. The house held. She reached for his hand, remembering the woman she had been on that road years before, hungry, desperate, alone. She wondered sometimes how close she had come to losing everything. Elias squeezed her hand once, grounding her without words. Winter came softer than expected. The children learned to trap cold air with quilts and laugh at their own breath fogging the room. Elias told stories by firelight. Julieta mended clothes and listened, content. When spring returned, it brought green hills and new plans. Elias talked about adding another room. Julieta talked about planting fruit trees near the wash. They did not rush. They never rushed anymore. One afternoon, Julieta stood at the edge of the property watching Dela help Drew practice reading signs Elias had carved. She felt something deep and steady settle inside her. Not excitement, not fear, just knowing. Elias came up beside her, wiping his hands on his trousers. He asked what she was thinking. She said she was thinking about how a name could change a life. He smiled and said sometimes a name was just an invitation. That night, after the children slept, they sat together under a sky thick with stars. Julieta rested her head against his shoulder. She told him she never thanked him properly for stopping that wagon. He said she had thanked him every day since by staying. She laughed softly and said she had almost forgotten the words that started it all. He asked which ones. She reminded him about the last name. He told her he had never stopped being grateful she took it. The fire burned low, the land breathed around them, nothing pressed in, nothing was missing. Years later, travelers sometimes stopped at the homestead. They heard stories about a woman who once tried to rob a wagon and found a home instead. Julieta never corrected them. Elias only smiled. The road still passed by their land, stretching on toward places they no longer needed to reach. They had everything they were meant to carry. And every night, when the lantern dimmed and the house settled, Julieta lay beside Elias and felt the quiet strength of a life built not from luck, but from choice. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more emotional love and breakup stories that will touch your soul.